Hello everyone. So welcome to my baby YouTube channel. And you know how YouTube videos usually have intro music? Life Notes by Kevin. I practiced that. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the Metacrisis. If you're looking at the screen, you can already see this topic is a little bit on the heavy side. And when I approach this topic, usually via the climate crisis, I usually will ask students, where do you find your personal resilience from? I find my personal resilience through the people around me, through the fun I have, through playing the guitar. And I find my personal resilience coming quite a bit from my religion as well. So, if you're in a difficult place in life, you might want to consider not watching this till the end, because it might be a little bit distressing. But as one student once told me, he feels worse when he doesn't know what's coming. He wants to be certain. He wants to know exactly what's going to happen. Unfortunately, we can't tell the future. We can make predictions. We are fairly certain of what may happen in some cases. But yeah, this is definitely not futurology. Okay, so if you've taken care of yourself, if you're watching this, you're probably in a safe place. Yeah, let's dive in. So the Metacrisis, sometimes known as the polycrisis, I've subtitled this "Why Modern Civilization Faces Collapse." Yeah, a lot of you, my friends, my students, would have heard me say, I think maybe modern civilization might collapse. That collapse may be boring. I'll spend some time on that later. But let's just think about when our industrial scale delights have industrial scale ends. I feel quite clever that I thought of that line. You might recognize where it comes from. So the meta crisis, we can begin by thinking about all the global crises that we know about. The most well-known one that people talk about, probably the climate crisis. So the climate crisis comes with its attendant ills of extreme weather, crop failures, ocean acidification, rising sea levels, and such. A recent article, it had a headline saying, "The world is potentially on track to keep global warming at or a shade below 2 degrees Celsius hotter than pre-industrial times. A goal that once seemed out of reach according to a study published Wednesday in the journal Nature." Prestigious journal there. And in fact, I checked last night. 2024 warmed by 1.55 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. So if we can get it below 2, or keep it below 2, that would be brilliant. But this article says that will only happen if countries not only fulfill their specific pledged national targets for curbing carbon emissions by 2030, but also come through on more distant promises of reaching net zero carbon emissions by mid-century. So some of those carbon emission targets come from the Paris Climate Agreement, right? Can you name any country that's met their Paris Agreement goals? Depressing slide. Yeah. So this is part of the meta crisis. Right, we have the climate crisis, top left, with all its attendant ills. But we have a lot more. Let me hop to the right. There's also political polarization, with people vilifying those who disagree with them politically. Someone who doesn't agree with your politics is no longer your fellow citizen you share common aims with, like Oh, I hope that there will no longer be any poor people in the world. Right? Common names like that. Someone who disagrees with you politically, sometimes they've become your enemy who needs to be defeated. With political polarization, you get things like what we are seeing in the US, where people are talking about the possibility of a civil war. And I haven't really checked US headlines, but to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about more shootings that are politically motivated. I hope that doesn't happen, but moving to the right, one step down, there's also wealth inequality, an ever widening wealth gap, with the top 1% of the world's richest people owning more than 95% of humanity, according to Oxfam. And we also have a mental health crisis. The WHO and the UN in 2022 told us that we are in a global mental health crisis. Does it look like it has been solved? Perhaps not. Then there are wars around the world, global conflicts, bottom left, right? Ongoing wars that as of today, 24th June, do I have the date right? I hope so. As of 24th June, people have been making memes about World War III starting because the US has bombed Iran, right? Iran and Israel are going at it. Russia and Ukraine are still going at it. There are quite a few more. Of course, I don't think World War III is about to start, but it certainly feels like it. And here's my favorite one. Favorite crisis. The last one, on the left, meaning crisis. We face a meaning crisis in that people have lost the sense that the world and their lives are meaningful. I think this is very much linked to how much we have lost touch with our bodies and with our ancient traditions, wisdom traditions especially. But okay, that's not the topic of this video. Topic of this video, Metacrisis. Right, all these crises we face together, that's the Metacrisis. So the Cascade Institute says that a global polycrisis, they use the word polycrisis, a global polycrisis occurs when multiple crises in multiple global systems become causally entangled in ways that significantly degrade humanity's prospects. These interacting crises produce harms greater than the sum of those crises would in isolation. Something's wrong with this sentence. These interacting crises produce harms greater than the sum of those the crises would produce in isolation, were their host systems not so deeply interconnected. So this is a network of global crises, and it's definitely not just like isolated problems that we see when we think about all the major crises. And to be clear, this is not the entirety of the global crises that we face. So, bit of AI slop for you. The meta crisis, these aren't separate issues to be solved individually. They are interconnected challenges that amplify each other through complex feedback loops. The AI thing is, it's not X, it's Y. These aren't separate issues to be solved individually. They are interconnected challenges that amplify each other through complex feedback loops. So what does this all mean for the world? To answer that, let's look at some of the drivers of the meta crisis. And in fact, I use the word meta crisis, not polycrisis, because I think there are underlying drivers that almost every crisis shares. So my favorite driver of the meta crisis, capitalism's pursuit of profits, which ignores any limits that our planet has, which ignores any limits to growth. So under the capitalist system, every country tries to grow its GDP, its gross domestic product. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, you can think of it as all the stuff that a country produces and does. So if you break your leg, hopefully not, if you break your leg and have to pay $1,000 to get it fixed, that goes into GDP. If you pay your therapist for a bunch of therapy sessions to start to heal from your childhood trauma, that goes into GDP too. If I buy a guitar, that goes into GDP. So GDP measures all of that. We usually talk about GDP growing each year. So Singapore, for example, had a GDP of 501.4 billion USD in 2023. It's a lot. That's 500 billion USD worth of stuff being done. And what about 2019? In 2019, Singapore had a GDP of 376.9 billion USD. Less, but still a lot. So Singapore grew its GDP by almost 125 billion USD. So I just pulled these numbers off Google just in case anyone's wondering. I'm not going to deal with like purchasing power parity and all of that. Okay, so why did this happen? Why did Singapore grow its GDP like that? How does this happen? As workers, probably like you and me, everyone wants to make more money, right? So what does your boss say when you ask for a raise? For a tutor in a tuition center, it's get me more students. For an assessment book editor, it might be edit more text, lead a team, help me make more assessment books that I can sell for more money. If you're an independent musician, it's let's get more plays, let's perform more, right? It's always more and more and more. Most of us already know what that means for the climate. And let's make things clear. For many of us, if we don't look for higher incomes, we may not be able to secure the necessities for life. If we don't make enough money, some of us will become homeless. We may not be able to afford nutritious food. So, at one point of my life, in fact, I was eating mainly white bread and peanut butter just to save money. But I was also a little bit careful. Quite careful, I want to say. I was making sure that I was eating apples and celery and grapes, right? So bread, peanut butter, and fruit, a lot of fruit. And I was probably healthier than I had ever been because I was careful with nutrition and eating meat sometimes, and definitely getting a lot of exercise as a musician back then. So we need to make more money, a lot of us, because we need to secure our bare necessities. So in this system that we are in, what does it produce? What are the results of this system? When governments chase GDP growth every year and businesses chase profits at all costs, it produces a massive amount of wealth, right? Who holds that wealth? You? Me? Not me. So you can look up the world's richest people online, right? Billionaires. So for billionaires, it seems to be for them that it's good to accumulate more and more, even if the sheer amount of wealth and power they have look utterly obscene when we put them next to a statistic of the number of children starving in the world. So according to the UN, some 148 million children in the world, about 1 in 5, that's 20%, they are chronically malnourished to some degree. Right, that's bad. So what happens as individuals get richer and richer? Their ecological and carbon footprints get larger and larger. I'm not rich at all, right? I try to be environmentally friendly, but I do take the occasional economy flight. And so my carbon footprint still isn't great. I checked, the average Singaporean produces about 8.31 metric tons of carbon emissions a year. And when someone tries to be careful, for me, when I try to estimate mine, I came in below average because I don't have a car. I live in a small flat. I try to use my devices for as long as I can. And these choices matter. But I can't fool myself. Right? As a general rule, the richer you are, the larger your ecological footprint, the larger your carbon footprint. My carbon footprint is not even sustainable if everyone in the world has that. So let's think about what the richest are doing. According to Oxfam, the richest 1%, there's my statistic, the richest 1% account for more carbon emissions than the poorest 66% of humanity. That's in 2023. And also, Oxfam, according to Oxfam, billionaires emit more carbon pollution in 90 minutes than the average person does in a lifetime. 90 minutes. And so when we get all these crises, like the climate crisis together with wealth inequality, do you think billionaires want to change our system? Do you think they want to change the system that has given them so much wealth and power? No. Even if it means that their children are going to inhabit a world that's far worse than what we have now, they still will want that wealth and power, in part because people who act like that, people who willingly destroy natural resources around them, I would say that they would usually be facing a meaning crisis as well. Like, they don't get a sense that the world and people like you and me are important. We are not meaningful, I think, to their lives beyond the fact that we generate wealth for them. And so there are these feedback loops. One crisis feeds another. Look, if all of us were good Buddhists, if we all focused on reducing suffering in the world, right, that good Buddhists do, if we are decent people, I think a lot of our crises would be solved fairly quickly. Right? Buddhists are committed to the principle of non-harm. Non-harm, no more wars. Or if we all focused on loving our neighbors as ourselves. I know Christians have gotten a bad rap these days, but I think Christians do like charity work sometimes pretty well. Maybe maybe not in recent times, I don't know. But if you consider, if everyone found meaning in life the way that they have usually done so, through helping other people, through loving themselves, through being connected to their environment, yeah, maybe our crises wouldn't be that bad. So let's return to what all this means for the world. Scientists have warned us, and warned the ruling classes as well, about what we can expect as the climate heats up. We will see more extreme weather. People are already dying from more intense heat waves, more violent storms, extended droughts, forest fires, whatnot. And of course, the climate crisis could hit yields of key crops even if farmers adapt. And people are trying, like in ASEAN. Saw a recent headline that said ASEAN was studying what the climate crisis would do to crop yields in ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and our countries are cooperating with each other to see how we could protect ASEAN as a region. So disasters, both natural and unnatural, around the world because of climate change, less food for everyone while the world population continues to grow. How do you think this will end? Even mainstream news websites like The Guardian now talk about the collapse of modern civilization with a 2024 headline reading, "We need dramatic social and technological changes. Is societal collapse inevitable?" Well, it's important to define what this collapse is. There is a chance that we'll see a Hollywood-style collapse with bombs flying and people trudging through landscapes scoured by nuclear war, like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, which is great novel, depressing but great. There's also a chance that humanity gets its act together and we carefully shrink modern civilization to something more manageable. It might be the case that collapse takes a slow and boring path, and the world just goes through crisis after crisis till all of us die quietly of various pandemics and disasters. So you can picture global GDP, all the stuff that we produce. We can picture global GDP shrinking, either because all of us are dead through nuclear war or something, or because all of us decide to give ourselves plenty of rest time while ensuring that all of us, we get all of our basic necessities. Call it eco-socialist degrowth, right? We can do away with a lot of extra activity in the economy, right? If we only work for our necessities, our ecological footprints shrink along with our contribution to GDP. So let's take the devices on which we watch YouTube or whatever, right? I have a smartphone. I'm recording this on a laptop, and I try to use my devices for as long as possible. My previous phone, I think, was 5 years old, and I actually wanted to use it for a longer time, but my wife was getting a little bit annoyed that messages were taking so long to get through, because my poor old smartphone would be like, "Oh, I'm thinking about which app to open first, Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever." So my old phone would take a long time to deliver those messages, and she was getting a little bit annoyed. But at least I used it for 5 years. My current phone, hopefully it gets to 7 years. My current laptop, hopefully it also gets to 7 years, 5 years? I don't know, like my previous laptop. Now, if I could use my devices for the rest of my life, I would. But the manufacturers of these devices, right, they build what we call planned obsolescence into them. Our devices are designed to fail, and when they fail, we have to get new ones, and the profit machine keeps on churning, right? So imagine we shrink GDP. One of the things that we can do is to make our devices last forever, and the companies that produce these devices, they can. So a very tiny smartphone company that you may not know about, it's called Fairphone. You may not know about them because their phones are designed to last for a long time. The problem is that if I buy a Fairphone now from Europe, that's the only place where I can get it from, I think. Cheapest place, perhaps. If I get a Fairphone from Europe and I drop my phone, I can buy a screen replacement, right? Replace the screen that's cracked. If my battery wears out, I can buy a replacement battery. So the consequence of that is that Fairphone customers buy one phone and then only go back to the company for replacement parts. So the company Fairphone, their profit margins aren't very large because their customers don't keep on going back to them to buy new devices. So shrinking global GDP may not be a bad thing, because if we work very hard, we contribute to global GDP. But if we don't have free time, then life gets a little bit worse, right? So I like Nick Fuller Guggen's take on it. He wrote the novel The Great Transition. Um, he has billions of people die from climate disasters. Right? Very easy to deal with the world population there. While the survivors of these disasters, they band together in climate-friendly cities. It's a kind of half-earth socialism achieved through hand-waving the bulk of the Earth's population away. And then we have problems if you think about the science of what he's doing, the science of a lot of eco-socialist science fiction novels. We have the problems that cities need a large hinterland to survive. So science of it may or may not work out depending on who you believe. Now, I've focused mainly on how hyper-capitalism has caused our climate wars. But the more you look into the crises visiting the world, it could get bleaker. So, wealth inequality itself could destroy our civilization as it stands. Consider cities that have slums side by side with opulent mansions and skyscrapers. We don't have that in a city like Singapore, and that's where the picture comes from. I think it looks like Singapore to me. And sure, there are differences in how people live in Singapore, but it's not as obscene as one person having no bathroom to go to and another person having 10. But right now, as we speak, wealthy people are buying political influence that has seen their wealth grow faster than those of us who aren't wealthy. Here's Oxfam again. Billionaire wealth surges by 2 trillion in 2024, 3 times faster than the year before, while the number of people living in poverty has barely changed since 1990. That's the 2 trillion statistic that I forgot to place elsewhere. So let's point out the obvious. If a small number of people hoard more and more of the world's resources, that means less and less for the rest of us. If the masses are impoverished and a tiny elite has riches beyond our wildest imagination, can we still call that civilization? Of course, all of this can be distressing, especially if you're hearing this for the first time. But there are things that you can do. If this is new information for you, the first thing that you can do is to build on your informational competence. Educate yourself and build what Neil Postman eloquently called a bullshit detector, right? You don't want to be fooled so easily by politicians who say, oh, we are going to grow our GDP forever and ever. And earlier I mentioned that we are also going through a meaning crisis. So let me point out the obvious. Regardless of how the meta-crisis or poly-crisis unfolds, we are all, in the long run, going to die. So make peace with that. Death is real. Don't waste time mindlessly doom scrolling. Read a book, have fun with friends, make some music, live joyfully, entertain yourself by making YouTube videos perhaps. And I might just have another video talking about how we generate meaning in life. Maybe next time. So I'm almost at the end of my video, but I'm fully intending on explaining in another video why all of this is particularly important for GP students, where we can think about those systemic changes that address root causes rather than symptoms. Right, so for the GP students, if you take a look at 2024's Paper 1 essay questions, it should be obvious enough how the stuff that I've looked at today is relevant. And if you don't see it immediately, maybe consider approaching me for private tuition. Right, okay, so that's the end. Do I have outro theme music? Life Notes by Kevin.